Fix this engine before sunrise, recruit, and I'll marry you myself." General Victoria Sterling's sharp, mocking voice echoed off the steel rafters of Hangar 4, cutting through the hum of heavy machinery. More than 40 senior mechanics and ranking officers fell dead silent. Beside the towering million-dollar experimental jet engine stood 24-year-old Marcus Reed. He was a newly enlisted black mechanic, wearing oil-stained fatigues, his hands steady despite the cold, humiliating stares surrounding him. General Sterling stepped closer, her military boots clicking rhythmically against the concrete floor. She looked at Marcus with cool condescension. The engine before them was a legendary nightmare, a sabotaged prototype with an intake lock that 3 veteran engineering teams had failed to dislodge over 6 weeks. To demand its repair in 6 hours was not an assignment. It was a public execution of a young man's dignity. Or perhaps, Sterling added, her voice dropping into a sneer that caught on the microphones of nearby observers, "you'd prefer to admit that people like you belong in the supply closet, not on my flight line." Cruel chuckles rippled through the back rows of officers. Marcus didn't flinch. He didn't raise his voice, nor did he look away. He slowly unrolled a worn leather tool roll onto the metal workbench. Alongside modern chrome ratchets lay a single, heavily scarred 7/16" wrench. Its handle was stamped with the initials ER, and one jaw had been ground down strangely thin by hand. As the heavy hangar doors sealed against the gathering night, the countdown began. Sterling thought she had trapped an arrogant recruit into a court-martial for failing a direct order. She had no idea that the old ground-down wrench in Marcus's hands was about to unearth a 30-year-old military secret that would bring her entire career crashing down before dawn. To understand Marcus Reed, you have to understand the silent, erased history of the men who built the foundations of American air power from the shadows. 30 years before Marcus set foot in Hangar 4, his grandfather, Elijah Reed, was a civilian master technician working at the same airfield during the height of systemic segregation. Elijah possessed a rare intuitive genius for jet propulsion, yet because of the color of his skin, he was never allowed to wear a uniform, hold a title, or sign his name to the blueprints he perfected. Instead, his brilliant modifications were routinely stolen by rising young officers who built their careers on his uncredited labor. One of those ambitious young officers was a junior lieutenant named Victoria Sterling. When Elijah was quietly forced into retirement without a pension, the only thing he took from the base was his custom-made 7/16 wrench. He had personally ground down its jaw to reach a hidden, non-standard bypass valve, a secret safety mechanism he had designed himself to prevent catastrophic engine failures. Before Elijah passed away, he handed that wrench to his grandson, Marcus, with a single instruction: never let them tell you that you don't belong in the room where history is made. Marcus had spent his entire life studying his grandfather's secret schematics. When he walked into Hangar 4 that evening, he wasn't just a recruit facing a hostile general. He was the keeper of a truth that history had tried to bury. By 3 in the morning, the air inside Hangar 4 was thick with tension and the sharp smell of aviation fuel. General Sterling stood in the glass observation balcony above, sipping coffee, fully expecting Marcus to break. But down on the floor, Marcus worked with surgical precision. While other mechanics had tried brute force on the main turbine, Marcus focused entirely on the secondary fuel housing, the exact spot where his grandfather had built the hidden bypass valve 30 years ago. The crowd of watching mechanics began to shift. Their initial scoffs turned into uneasy whispers as they watched the young recruit manipulate the machine with a familiarity that seemed impossible for a novice. Marcus picked up the old ground-down wrench stamped ER. He slipped it deep into the narrow recess beneath the primary manifold, a space where no standard modern tool could fit. From the balcony, Sterling's smug expression suddenly wavered.
Her eyes widened as she set her cup down, her eyes widening as she recognized the exact angle of approach Marcus was using. It was an approach documented in only one place, a classified technical journal that had mysteriously vanished from the military archives 30 years prior. The same journal she had claimed as her own work to earn her first star. A cold sweat broke out on Sterling's neck. She rushed down the metal stairs, her boots echoing wildly as she marched back onto the hangar floor. "Stop work immediately," she commanded, her voice edged with sudden, raw panic. "Recruit Reed, stand down. You are tampering with classified hardware."
Marcus didn't stop. With one final calculated turn of the scarred wrench, a loud metallic click reverberated through the vast space of Hangar 4. The jammed intake turbines spun freely. The pressure gauges flared to life, stabilizing into a perfect, flawless green reading. The impossible engine was fixed, 2 hours before sunrise. The crowd of mechanics erupted into breathless murmurs, but Marcus didn't celebrate. He slowly pulled the custom wrench from the housing, wiped the black grease from its handle, and held it up under the bright halogen work lights. General Sterling stood frozen, her face drained of all color as she stared at the initials stamped into the steel, E.R. "This engine didn't fail because of sabotage, General," Marcus said, his voice ringing loud and clear across the hangar. "It failed because 30 years ago, when you copied my grandfather Elijah Reed's design, you didn't understand why he ground down this tool. You left out the pressure bypass valve because you didn't know it existed." Gasps swept through the hangar. Senior officers stepped forward, looking between the functioning engine, the ground-down wrench, and the trembling general. "You built your entire reputation on a stolen design, and tonight you used his grandson to fix the flaw you couldn't comprehend." As the first golden rays of sunrise broke through the high glass windows of Hangar 4, the atmosphere had transformed completely. There was no marriage, and there were no more mocking jokes. The Inspector General's office, alerted by senior chief petty officers who had watched the live diagnostic feed, stepped onto the floor within the hour. General Sterling was stripped of her command pending a full military investigation into fraudulent service records and historical IP theft. As Sterling was escorted out of the hangar in utter disgrace, the remaining mechanics, men who had laughed at Marcus 6 hours earlier, stood in quiet respect. One by one, they stepped forward, removing their caps and extending their hands to the young black recruit. Marcus carefully wrapped his grandfather's wrench back into its leather roll. He didn't demand an apology, and he didn't boast in his victory. He simply slung his tool bag over his shoulder, stepping out into the morning sunlight as a master of his craft. He had walked into Hangar 4 as a mocked recruit, but he walked out as the vindication of a grandfather's legacy, proving to the world that brilliance built in silence will always outshine the loudest arrogance.